Thank you very much, and I'm really delighted to be here as Head of Policy and Government Relations at the Payments Association. I just wanted to invite all our members to constantly engage with us, having your inputs, insights, vision for how the future of payments has to be is very, very crucial to the work that we constantly do to maintain relations, talk to regulators, speak to politicians, explaining what the industry needs to strive and be successful. So always please come and engage with me, and I will always find time to speak to all of you. In the meantime, I'm delighted to have this fantastic panel. We have three very important people that do not need any introduction, but I would be very pleased to call them on stage. Marcel Haag, Director for Horizontal Policies and the Director General for Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets Union at the European Commission. Thank you very much for traveling from the EU to us. And Victoria Cleland, Executive Director for Payments, Bank of England, and Henk van Holle, CEO of Open Banking. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here, and I'm not sure whether we're going to use this technological things yet, but maybe later. So we have a very interesting title to discuss. Payments Next Giant Leap. How is policy keeping pace in a fast-moving sector? And I would like to start asking you a few questions, Marcel. Usually we should start with the lady, but we start with guests that have been traveling from far. What are the most impactful developments in the payments world at this time, and how can we take advantage of them?
Yeah, I think a lot is going on in the payments space at this point, and it has become a very dynamic and very exciting area. So let me just touch briefly on a few of the developments that are also very important from a policy-making perspective. The first, I would say, is account-to-account on instant payment infrastructure. A2A on instant payment infrastructure has the potential of being a real challenger to the cards, because it can potentially be faster and cheaper than the use of cards. And here we see that this is an area that is really developing very, very fast, and we have a number of very good examples here in Europe, but not only in Europe. One of the challenges here will be that these very successful providers go international and go cross-border. That is something that we also see emerging now, and we see two models here. One I would call bottom-up, and that is a number of national providers ensuring interoperability and making sure that their service can be used across borders as well. The European Payments Association, which is an organization that would bring together and will ensure interoperability of service between a Spanish, an Italian, and a Portuguese provider, as an example here. But then there is also the European Payments Initiative that is done by that's been set up by a number of European banks, which is the other model, which I would call top-down, and which has from the start a transnational, transborder aspiration. Both models are very different in terms of technological challenges, but also marketing, branding, and so on and so forth. But this is what we see happening. The second point that I would like to mention is the increase of fraud. We see new types of fraud, and fraud is new types of fraud are developing all the time. This is a challenge that we have to jointly address, the industry, but also policymakers. We have strengthened the EU framework against fraud. I know that the UK is also
Yes. New rules will come in very soon.
Working on this. This is about fraud prevention, but it's also a question of liability and how do we how are liabilities distributed. I know that this is also a question that the UK is.
Victoria, would you like to add something else on one of the main trends
is looking at
in payments at this time?
Yeah, sure. I think as Marcel said, it really is a very exciting time to be in the world of payments. We used to be seen as the plumbing, and I think now we're seeing change in a number of different ways. Part of it is sort of the way that people are paying. We're seeing new ways to pay. We're seeing new ideas come out, sort of stable coins, CBDCs, but we're also seeing a lot of enhancements in the existing payment rails. I think on the earlier panel, people talk about a lot of change at the very front and the very back end of the transactions, so people now using watches rather than even phones and things. So there's a lot happening, there's a lot of new technology, a lot of excitement, and there is sometimes a slight danger that let's go and follow that sort of whizzy, exciting idea. From a sort of policy perspective, and I'll talk a bit as a policy maker, but I also operate on real-time gross settlement systems, so I have to I operate and do policy. It's trying to think, what is the real use case? Yes, the technology is there and we can do something exciting with it, but who will be using it? So focus on what you are trying to achieve, and then the policy comes in terms of, that sounds great, innovation is helpful, but let's think about the unintended consequences, making sure that we've got risk and resilience very much at the front. Think about what does it mean for consumer choice. So it's trying to look in those areas. We heard earlier about sort of ISO 20022, and it's great to hear that's getting so much attention. It may seem like a fairly technocratic thing,
on
but
ISOs, like, it's always complicated and technical. What are the main things that you think we're going to achieve with that? Like, can you expand on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it is an area, it is an important development, and it's really for industry to embrace it. From a policy making perspective, I see real advantages in harmonisation, so it enhances cross-border payments. In the UK, the Bank of England is working closely with PAY360 around a common credit message around ISO across the UK. But for industry, it can really help with straight-through processing, really understanding your customer more. I think you can really start using some AI to interrogate that enriched data that ISO is giving, which can help with AML, but also how better to serve your customers. So I think there are lots of opportunities in ISO, but it's only going to work if we use a harmonised version of ISO. There is a danger that people use ISO in slightly different ways. So I think the policymakers have got an important role in encouraging not just the adoption of ISO, but also how it is used. I think there are other areas where, again, we're seeing great innovation around APIs, which give good opportunities. At the Bank of England, we're introducing APIs as part of our RTGS renewal programme. But let's have a bit more consistency in terms of how those APIs are used globally. Again, we could have our completely different way of setting up an API here. So I think policymakers can help there. I think Marcel's point is really important. Technology can be used for bad stuff, and so understanding that, and so fraud is a issue that's being looked at, so mandatory reimbursement for app scam frauds is coming in later this year in the UK. We can use technology to help understand that and sort of spot patterns as well. So as a sort of policymakers, it's always, how can we get the best out of innovation without bringing those undue risks?
Thank you, Victoria. And Henk, from an industry perspective, like open banking is at the center of everything. What are, in your views, the most impactful developments in payments?
Well, I think we mentioned, I think I'm not going to mention the fraud again and all the other elements, but I think customer experience is something at the forefront as well with us, like you mentioned, Victoria. The use cases are very important, but also in order to enable consistent customer experiences across the board, we need to ensure that on top of these APIs and standards, we have customer experience guidelines that are respected as well, so that we have a consistent customer experience across payment systems as well. So that's more at the front end of things, and that's where we are involved as well in terms of developing kind of next generation APIs, enhancing them with fraud data as well to make better decisions as well in real time, but also ensuring that across payment systems we have that kind of customer experience delivered. And customer experience in open banking and open banking payments is mainly led by customer choice and customer control. And I think that's where we need to focus on more and more as well. And in answer to your policy question, I think it's VRP, of course, because that's at the heart of where we are in the UK, where we want to put customers and end users, SMEs as well, in control of recurring payments. They control when they pay, the frequency of pay, cross-border, even currency choice. All that can now be given, that control, to end users. Hence so important that what Chris was saying as well in terms of going forward with a rule book on VRP is so important, not only in terms of dispute management and customer protection, but also perhaps more targeted regulation, as he said, in terms of pricing.
Excellent. Well, we'll try to dig in a little bit more, Victoria. And how are policymakers and payment operators addressing the disparate set of frictions in cross-border payments? And how are innovations in payments facilitating these improvements?
I mean, there has, as Adam was mentioning earlier, been a lot of work recently on enhancing cross-border payments. I mean, cross-border payments are vital to so much of the world. It's not just something we're solving for the wholesale players, but it impacts retail, it impacts consumers, it impacts remittance payments. And so there has been a big drive driven by the G20 to enhance cross-border payments and sort of try and make them faster, more accessible, more transparent, so addressing some of the problems we've seen in the past. But to understand how to address it, the Financial Stability Board did some work. What are the frictions? What is it that is making cross-border payments even more difficult than domestic payments? And there are a list of sort of 7 different frictions. Things such as different operating hours from different payment systems, lack of harmonisation, reliance on legacy systems. And so the work that's been done initially from a policy perspective was to understand, okay, what are these problems? And then we developed a set of building blocks to address those, and it was really taking a very holistic approach. It isn't just a technology issue, it isn't just a data issue, it isn't just an AML issue. So it was really trying to pull these strands together and think, what are all of the areas that we need to address to make a difference? The initial couple of years work, which actually started in the height of lockdown, was really trying to understand a bit more about those problems, set out best practice, set out guidance, set out clear targets to aim for, because with all these things, everyone wants to do better, but we've actually set some very clear targets, a monitoring framework against those, and so you can actually look online at the FSB's website, and that will show the progress against these targets we've got for 2027. That was the easy bit. We now need to see action, and that comes from a number of players. So as a central bank, the Bank of England is looking, for example, at what can we do to increase our operating hours. If we get closer to 24/7, we'll be open
and
when a lot more other countries
now, right?
Yes, when a lot more other countries are open. So we've actually issued an industry discussion paper at the moment. Other central banks are looking at the same. Also, access. The more different types of players can access the system, again, that is helping cross-border, so we now enable non-bank payment service providers to access our system. ISO, again, another key sort of tenet of the cross-border roadmap. That really enables harmonisation, that lets more systems talk to each other, which can enable greater interlinking between different systems, and we're seeing quite a lot of work, particularly in Asia, for example, Singapore linking up with India, but there's also Nexus looking into more sort of, and that's where technology can be used to bring the different systems together. But we also need to look at areas such as the legal, supervisory and regulatory framework, what greater harmonisation can be brought there? How do we make it clearer, the regulation between a bank and a non-bank payment service provider? So it's really sort of pushing in a number of different areas. And for the private sector, sometimes it's going to mean responding to our surveys, please. Sometimes it means investing in change to really take advantage of ISO, of operating hours, really thinking about that customer journey. What more can you do to increase transparency? So there are actually quite a few task forces bringing together the public and the private sector to come up with sort of common answers.
Yeah. And what is happening in the EU on the same? How are you looking at cross-border?
I mean, there's first the cross-border inside the EU, where we have the single European payments area. So we have essentially a harmonized space. But then there is also the payments toward third countries, and indeed they are very important. And Victoria has already spoken to the ongoing standardization efforts, which are very important, and where the EU is also actively participating in. But then the challenge is, and I think it's pretty much as Victoria said, comparability and transparency when it comes to cross-border payments. And here we have introduced a new set of rules that will allow a better comparability and a better transparency when it comes to conversion charges and execution times. We will make sure that the conversion charges are expressed in the same way, so that they are more easily comparable, and that more information is given on execution times.
That's very good to know. And cross-border is always an area that needs concentration. But sadly, there is no time to ask you a few more questions about how CBDCs will impact that cross-border space, but maybe this is for another time. Before opening the floor to questions, quickly, Henk, going back to you, from open banking to open finance, how will this drive financial inclusion, innovation, and consumer empowerment?
Thank you for a good question. Yes, I think in general, we believe that open banking and open finance changes people's lives, improves people's lives, improves businesses as well, their operating lives as well. To give you an example, we have a TPP, I'm not going to name the TPP, but is mainly focusing, what they say, on driving non-discriminatory lending. So they're mainly focusing on vulnerable customers, and also key workers, NHS workers, and also civil servants. And they want to improve lending, and they of course have thin credit files, so that they need to be enriched with other information as well. They use the open banking standards, but also other standards, and combine them. And their result is that, but whilst doing that, they're also looking at the potential benefits they missed out on. So they even publish it on their website, how much benefits people are missing out on. And now they issued about 20 million in lending, and also give for free the review in terms of what benefits they can get. So I think it improves indeed also vulnerable customers' lives. And the interesting statistic here is that 75% of people taking out money were women in this perspective as well. So it's quite important, the link between open banking and also how we improve financial and digital inclusion as well in the industry. And then open finance, I think, echoing also the great work that CFIT has done in the blueprint there. So they are declaring in the blueprint that we can unlock through open finance about 30 billion of GDP growth each year by just unlocking the value of the data being released. But also they're mainly focused also on the two areas, so SMEs and vulnerable customers. And also open finance and open banking can be used to increase the productivity in the back end or in the front end as well. They had a major business case on Citizens Advice Bureau, where by automating the process of talking to their end users, so the citizens, they improved that they could do 150,000 more conversations just by automating that process. So there's a lot of other examples I can give, particularly SME finance is another one we're very interested in, and also what they've been majoring on as well. So open finance, open banking will continue to improve and change people's lives.
And we hope this will happen very soon as well.
Thank you.
So we're ready to take some questions. We've got 4 minutes and 55 seconds. So you have to be very rapid, quick, concise, no speeches, questions. Who's got the microphone and who wants to start? Any volunteer? Only shy people here. No questions. Well, if there are no questions, then maybe I can have some more questions for you. Digital euro, digital pound. Are we going to see them? When? And I think the industry is quite committed to these big projects. Regulators have been working constantly more. Now we have a response from the Bank of England on an official positioning. But I don't know, maybe you can tell us a little bit more, Victoria, and also from a European perspective, what's happening in Europe on the digital euro?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the Bank of England has been consulting on this, and our latest position is that we can see that in the future there could well be a need for a digital pound. We're not ready to make that decision yet. We want to see how other things are developing, what's going on in the commercial sector, but we want to be ready at the point in time we need to make that decision. So we're working hard to sort of undertake various proof of concepts, to think about the technology, and also get into a lot of the questions that are there. I mean, I talked earlier about sort of use cases, so really trying to think, okay, if we introduce this, who is going to use it? What are they going to use it for? Looking at how it fits into the broader ecosystem, but also listening very hard to the feedback we've received from the public. I mean, one of the key bits of feedback from the public consultation was sort of concerns around privacy and what would it mean if the Bank of England had access to all their data. So one of the key things we put in our sort of consultation response was the care with which we would be taking of that privacy, and also sort of stressing it isn't the Bank of England doing the day-to-day transactions. There'll be wallet holders and things. So we're still very much in listening mode. We want to sort of understand what people feel about it, what they would do. So I don't think we're as far along as some of the digital euro in terms we haven't made a decision, but we're trying to make sure that if we make the decision to go for it, we are ready to move quickly.
And where is the European Union on this?
Yeah, the ECB, the European Central Bank, has started looking into a possible digital euro also already a few years ago. And it has taken a number of strategic decisions, for example, that it would look into a retail version of a digital euro in the first place, and that it would look into payment as the major use case for the digital euro. So making it a means of payment rather than a store of value. Now, the ECB is continuing its exploration and experimentation, but the legal situation in the EU is that the ECB cannot take that decision on its own. It needs EU legislation which provides the basis and the framework on which the ECB can then ultimately decide if and when to introduce the digital euro. That's why the European Commission has been following the work of the ECB very closely and has made a proposal for a piece of legislation that would provide that framework, that is currently being discussed in the European Parliament and with the member states, and it's been discussed in a, I should say, constructive way. So the legislator is really looking at the substance of the issues, many of which have not yet been definitively decided on, I should say. But the sensitivities are exactly the ones that Victoria has referred to. So data protection is a is a major concern. The question of the impact on financial stability and on the financial system is a key concern, and in that context, the disintermediation of in particular banks is very important.
And can we say that policy is keeping pace in the fast-moving sector?
Well, I was about to say, indeed, I think we need that pace in there too, and the collaboration, because there's a lot of wallet holders out there. And if you look at the big boys and the big tech, I mean, there's a lot of wallets, so we need solutions soon as well through collaboration, and ensuring as well, like we do in standard setting, is ensuring that all harmonization. So we are having a 4.0 new release of our standards as well this year for the entire ecosystem to ensure we are having the ISO out there, and also the latest on financial APIs as well. So we just need to carry on being harmonized and interoperable. However, there's quite an industry push on moving forward quickly.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, as a representative of the Trade Association, we will keep this mission of pushing you towards where we would like you to always be ahead of everyone else. And thank you very much for agreeing to come here and share your thoughts with us. And I would hope that the floor is going to make you a little bit of a clack. Thank you very much.